Hello, welcome to Science and Mathematics All Around. Our first topic today is about body systems, genetics and diseases. At the end of this class, you will be able to describe the basic unit of human body. You will be able to describe the structure and function of DNA, its role in genetic inheritance, and understand the genetic components of diseases and the interplay between the genetic and environmental factors. Now let's start our lecture. So in today's lecture, we will discuss about cells, cell components and functions, DNA, communicable and non-communicable diseases, human microbiome, and then we will talk a little bit about immunity and vaccines. To start off our lecture, let me ask you a small question. What makes up your body? So if we break it down, we know our body is comprised of many organ systems. And these organs are comprised of different organs, which in turn is made up of different tissues, and at the most fundamental level there are cells. So cell is the basic building block of life. It's the smallest structural and functional unit of any organism. If we look at the structure of the cell, how the cell is made up of, you can see a cell is made up of mainly three components. Basically a human cell or the animal cell. It made up of a plasma membrane that is surrounding the cell. It made up of cytoplasm, which composed of two main parts, and then it composed of a nucleus. If we briefly go into each of these components, the first part is the plasma membrane that occur at the most outside of the cell. The plasma membrane is usually composed of two layers. You can see two layers here. Two layers of phospholipids. And among these two layers, you can see proteins and different sugar molecules attached to it. So what does it do? It regulates the entry and exit through its channels. It protects the cellular contents. It facilitates the communication between cells. It maintains the shape of the cell. It gives a shape to the cell. So these are the main functions of the plasma membrane. Our next component is cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is composed of mainly two parts, cytosol and organelles. Cytosol is the semi-transparent liquid matrix that is mostly composed of water. And in addition to that, there are ions, amino acids, proteins, waste products, many things. And in these cytosols, you can find organelles. Cytosol is the place where numerous cellular processes takes place. And the main other component is the organelles. There are many organelles in the cell, but if you are required to list a few that is very important, you can say ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi complex, mitochondria, nucleus, such things. And if we briefly look into these structures, ribosome is the site for protein synthesis. This is where your proteins become produced. The ribosome composed of mainly two parts. You can see a large subunit and a small subunit. And this whole part is made up of rRNA and proteins. These ribosomes occur freely in the cytosol, or sometimes they are attached to the outer surface of the nuclear envelope and the outer surface of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So what is endoplasmic reticulum? Endoplasmic reticulum is a series of interconnected membranous canals. You can see they start from the nuclear envelope and they are interconnected. All the canals are not closed, they are interconnected. There are two types of endoplasmic reticulum. One is smooth endoplasmic reticulum. You can see there is nothing outside on it. It's called smooth endoplasmic reticulum. It lacks ribosomes. And the other one is the rough endoplasmic reticulum. You can see outside there are ribosomes on the outside surface. So there are two different functions that are attached to this endoplasmic reticulum. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum is where the lipid synthesis happens. And the rough endoplasmic reticulum, since it has ribosomes, so it's a place where the protein synthesis happens. The next one is the Golgi complex. You can see it's a bit similar in structure to the endoplasmic reticulum, but there are main differences. So this is a stack of closely folded, flattened sacs. But the main thing is they are not interconnected. They are closed sacs. So Golgi complex is like if you take it as a sorting center. So it collects all the vesicles that comes from the endoplasmic reticulum. It sorts them, it modifies them, and then it dispatches to their correct location. So Golgi complex is the major site for carbohydrate synthesis. The proteins from ER packages into secretory vesicles inside the Golgi complex, and during this time the molecular composition and sometimes the metabolic functions of the proteins becomes changed. The next important one is the mitochondria. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of your cell. Why we call it powerhouse? It's where the energy is produced. It is enclosed by two membranes and it contains small quantities of DNA. So mitochondria is place where aerobic respiration occurs. Why it is important? Because the aerobic respiration produces energy in terms of ATP. Next most important component of your cell is the nucleus. If mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, nucleus is the control center of the cell. Similar to mitochondria, nucleus is also enclosed by two membranes, two nuclear envelope membranes. And it has pores that connects the nucleoplasm with the outside world. The nucleus contains the most important component in our body, the DNA or our genetic material. So it regulates all the metabolic activities of the cell and it stores entire hereditary information in our DNA. So all your cells contains the blueprint of who you are. So this blueprint is known as DNA. So why we call DNA a blueprint of you? If you take an example, this is a blueprint of this house and it will give you all the details about how many rooms are there, how many doors are there, how many windows are there, what is the size of each of these rooms. So similarly, the DNA also gives everything about yourself. DNA contains the codes for instructions needed for organism to grow, develop and survive and reproduce. It is a genetic material that stores and transfers information from generation to generation. Now let's dig deep into DNA. So what does DNA stands for? DNA stands for deoxyribose nucleic acid. So DNA is kind of a nucleic acid. It's a genetic material that passes from one generation to the next. It stores all genetic information. It codes for proteins. It is responsible for determining all the traits of your organisms, such as your blood type, whether you can roll your tongue, your curly hair, the condition of your hair, your eye color, your hair color. All these information are stored in your DNA. So what is this DNA made up of? DNA is a nucleic acid, so it's made up of very small components. These small components or the building blocks of DNA is known as nucleotides. And each nucleotide contains a sugar component that is known as deoxyribose, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous base. So, the sugar component deoxyribose is known as the deoxyribose. That is where this nucleic acid gets its name. The nitrogenous bases are of two types, pyrimidines and purines. The pyrimidines include thymine and cytosine, and purines include adenine and guanine. You can see the difference between these two structures. Purines are much bigger than pyrimidines. They have two rings compared to the one ring structure of pyrimidines. So DNA, it is actually not just one strand. It's two strands that are arranged in a double helical structure. So you can see it looks like a staircase that is a swirling staircase. So you can see there are two strands, and this is the base of each of these strands. So this base is known as sugar phosphate backbone. The sugar phosphate backbone is comprised of deoxyribose sugar molecules and connected to phosphate groups by phosphodiester bonds. So as I told you earlier, DNA is composed of two strands. So how does these two strands bind together? This connection is made up by hydrogen bonds. The hydrogen bonds occur between purines and pyrimidines. Usually, always the guanine connect with cytosine by 3 hydrogen bonds, and adenines connect with thymines with 2 hydrogen bonds. So the base pairing always occurs G with C and A with T. So where does this DNA store? How does this DNA store? We know that it stores inside the nucleus. So how does it store? The DNA, this is the DNA, they wind up very tightly and then they fix into these structures called chromosomes. These chromosomes you can find inside the human cell. DNA stores genetic information as codes. So the way that they store the information is as codes. The genetic code is the sequence of bases inside the DNA. So if you look at this, this is a genetic code, the sequence of bases. So how does the sequence of bases pass this information to produce protein? That process happens like this. So is this DNA? DNA transfer its information into RNA. This process is known as transcription. You can see when there is T, it becomes A. It's always complementary. T always binds with A. And A, but this is, you can see the letter is different here. Why? Because this is an RNA. RNA do not have thymine. They have uracil instead. So instead of T, A binds with U here. And C binds with G. G binds with C. G binds with C. So you can see there is a pattern that goes on. So this process is known as transcription, that is converting the DNA information into RNA. And then the RNA will be translated into protein. This process is known as translation. In this process, the codon, that is 3 bases, translate 1 amino acid. And when these amino acids combine together, they will make up the protein. So now we know how does the DNA transfers into proteins. So these proteins, they sometimes act as enzymes in your body. They sometimes act as hormones. They act as antibodies. They act as many different forms. and these forms make up your body. So proteins are structures and machinery of life. So I earlier told you DNA is inherited. It passed from one generation to another. So how does it go? Maybe you have heard sometimes some people say, you just look like your mom, or you just look like your dad. It's because the genetic material of ours comes from mom or comes from dad. Sometimes we look like both of them. That means we are a combination of genetic material that comes from your mom and that comes from your dad. But how can we say you look exactly like your mom or you look exactly like your dad? You don't resemble your mom. That is because if you resemble someone, the genetic material, the genes that comes from mom is dominant, more dominant. It expresses strongly than your father's. If you look exactly like your father, then that means your father's genes are more dominant, more expressive. So in this way, a child would get one part of the genes from mother, another part of the genes from father. And child is made up as a genetic makeup of mother and father. So how does these genetic materials comes from? So from father, the sperms comes and the sperms have one set of chromosomes. And from mothers, we get the eggs. Eggs has another set. So that's why it's called N and N. When they combine together, it will form you that has two sets of chromosomes. So you will get chromosomes, one per pair from each parent. So how many chromosomes does human normally have? If you get 23 chromosomes from mother and 23 chromosomes from father, that means humans usually have 46 chromosomes and 23 pairs of chromosomes. These chromosomes, the 46 chromosomes, they usually arrange in pairs. So each parent contributes one chromosome to the pair. And if you see the chromosomes, there are 23 pairs as I told you before. The 23rd pair is known as the sex chromosome. That is the chromosome that determines whether you are a girl or a boy. So if you are a girl, this chromosome will be X and X. If you are a boy, this chromosome will be X and Y. The other chromosomes are known as autosomes. So why it is important to understand inheritance? Why does it matter so much? Because it influences on characters. The chromosomes carries information for producing proteins that determine the characters like eye color, blood type, susceptibility to different diseases. So we can say, understanding genetics, we can explain the physical and health related characteristics in your daily life. The second one, we can predict characters. So inheritance patterns tells you which characters you will get from mother or from father. And similarly, it will predict the disorders as well. So it is important for the health management because it's important that we can anticipate what risks they have and we can make the informed decisions based on that. Not only that, the information in the DNA is important for family planning, mainly the genetic counseling. So if your family has some kind of a disease that is passed from one generation to generation, then when you want to have kids, you understand the risk of having kids. So you can get informed decisions about having kids, or you can take proper precautions for that. And the most important one of these is personalized medicine. So we all know about medicine. Medicine, when we get medicine for a certain disease, These medicines, for some people, it quickly works. Some people, it does not quickly work, it takes long time to work. But for some people, it will have side effects. But if you have personalized medicine like we have it now, the personalized medicine, it will make the medicine based on your genetic makeup. So if you will not have any side effects, and all the medicines that you take will be effective for you, efficiently effective for you. So this is why the understanding of this inheritance matters in daily life. So how can we identify this risk in daily life? Simply by genetic testing. So you can do genetic testing for adults, you can do genetic testing for children. Even you can do genetic tests while you are still inside your mommy's tummy. So pregnant ladies can do genetic testing for their unborn child. These tests are known as prenatal tests. So if there are big abnormalities inside the baby, so the mother can know beforehand. So they can take precautions. So if I take an example to further explain this to you, the best example for this is the blood type determination. If I ask you what is your blood type, some people will say A, some people will say B. If I ask you how many blood types there are, basically there are 4 blood types: A, B, O and AB. These blood types are usually determined by your chromosome 9, a gene in your chromosome 9. A and B blood types are dominant blood types, more stronger. O blood type is recessive blood type. A and B genes, I am talking about genes now, I am not talking about blood type. Genes, A and B genes are co-dominant. If they express together, they cannot express A or they cannot express B. They will express another blood type known as AB. So first I want to understand mainly 2 terms, a phenotype and genotype. Phenotype is the character that is expressed to the outside world. For example, blood type is a phenotype. That is the character. What is genotype? Genotype is a genetic composition. That if you look here, this is a genotype. And the phenotype of this is blood group A. So if you see, when the 2 letters or 2 alleles of your gene, if they are 2 different letters, we usually call it heterogeneous. If it is the same letter, we call it homogeneous. Remember these 2 terms because we will use it in the future. So let me first understand how this works. So first, if you get A allele from your mother and if you get A allele from your father, your blood group will be AA and your phenotype will be A. If you get A from your mother, if you get B from your father, because A and B are co-dominant, your blood group will be AB. If you get A from your mother and O from your father, your blood group will still be A because A is dominant over O. And if you get O from your mother and O from your father, your blood group will be O because it's a recessive. So let's go into some of the examples so you can understand this further. If your mom is heterozygous A means the only available genotype is AO. And if your dad is heterozygous B, it should be BO. So what does the children look like? If from mom A and from father B, the blood group is AB. From mom A, father O, then the blood group is A. O from mother and B from father, blood group is B. O from mother and O from father, blood group will be O. So you can see the genetic composition. How does it prepare? Let's take another example. If your mom is heterozygous A and if your dad is homozygous B, you can see all the children will have AB blood group because AA and BB. So the oldest children will get AB. If we take another example, if your mom is heterozygous A, that is AO, if your dad is homozygous O, that is OO, then what will be your blood types? You will get A blood group, you will get O blood group. So there will be only 2 blood groups in the children. So similarly, you can identify how this genetics works, how it helps you to determine the blood group. Not only the DNA carries information about the traits or characters like blood group, it also gives you an understanding about different diseases. So we can use it to predict diseases.